Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Atlanta Film Festival Creative Conference. My name is JD Taylor. I have a group of ADs here that we're going to talk about what it's like to be an AD. And I think we'll just get started. If everybody wants to just start to introduce who they are, I'll just start with Steve and what your AD position is, and then I'll ask from there. So, Mr. Windle.
Okay, hey, I'm Steve Windle. I second and key. And yeah, working on becoming a first.
Fantastic. Mr. Bonaccorse.
Hi, greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is John Bonaccorse. In the film industry for the past 20 years, there's a term of endearment that people sometimes say is John Bon. I've been a production assistant since the year of 2001, joined the DGA in 2008, and started being a key second assistant director in the year of like 2015, 2016, sometimes a few shows earlier. So 41, almost 20 years in the business, and happy to be here.
Fantastic. Mr. Patterson.
How you doing? My name is Nate Patterson. I've been in the industry for roughly a decade now. Been key seconding for the last few years. You know, I bumped up to first a few times on the show, a few shows actually. And yeah, that's really it.
Key seconding. Fantastic, dude. All right, Mr. White.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Ben White. I'm a key second AD as well. I've been a key second for almost 10 years now, but I've been in the business since 2008. I started as a PA, like most of us, 2008 to 2012, and then moved to Atlanta and have been working here ever since.
Great. Galesic.
My name's Nate Galesic. I started working in the business full-time in 2011 as a set production assistant. I joined the Directors Guild in 2019. And I currently am a second. That's my job. And I just became available. I just finished a show, so I'm available for the summer if anybody needs me.
Hire Nate.
Yes, hire Nate. And then Christophe, sir.
So my name is Christophe Chanu. I'm a second AD, a key second AD. I started PAing when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. And I joined the guild in 1999 and been second and a key second for a while now.
Fantastic. All right, so Steve, I was just curious. I'm going to ask all you guys this just because I'm curious about it. Did you always like film? Did you know that you wanted to make movies when you were young? Did you go to film school? What was your kind of path for that?
8th grade. I grew up in Pennsylvania, outside of Philly, and I always liked telling stories. I wanted to be a director. I remember telling all my friends that in middle school, and then still wanted to do that when I graduated high school. I would walk around high school with a little mini DV video camera, and I'd just record everybody until I was told to stop doing that by the staff. And then went to Temple in Philly. Temple University for film, and fell into assistant directing because I used to build sets. I would design and build sets for the grad students and the seniors because they had their senior projects that they had to build or make. And anyway, one of the seniors said, "Hey, I like your attitude. You want to be my first AD?" He said, "I don't really know what that is, but I think you keep things going." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I did it during the weekend when we weren't in school, and it was awful, but I liked it, but I just didn't know what I was doing. So anyway, that next week, I just took a lot of time and researched stuff, went to the library, read all these books. This was back in 2003. And by going online and looking up what does an AD do, I found out about the DGA training program. And the next 3 years I applied to that. And during all that, I AD'd some things in Philadelphia and New York, and then moved to LA after I graduated college and got into the training plan that year. And then after I graduated that in 2011, then I have been ADing ever since. But yeah, once I started ADing in college, I just fell in love with it, and I haven't looked back.
Excellent. Yeah, it's funny. One of my first jobs in the film business was building sets, you know, and then the second AD saw me and she liked my attitude and said, "Hey, you want to keep PA for me?" I'm like, "Sure." So I was building this stuff too. I was good with the screw gun.
Oh, that's cool.
John Bond, same question.
Yeah. Can you just refresh the question, please?
Yeah, I was like, did you always like films? Did you know that you wanted to go into movies? You know, like, were you doing stuff like Steve was and shooting stuff? And
So way
the
back
world?
when in the 90s, I was a huge skater and I did a lot of skateboard videos. So that kind of like started the passion of like videography, you know, and I grew up in Germany. So I was traversing, you know, Europe with a, you know, 8mm handheld camera, trying to make videos, doing, you know, 8mm video to VCR, stop, pause, edit, skate videos with it, like one track of music, which was
Linear editing where you can't go back.
Oh yeah, it was horrible. And then I moved back to the States in 97. And then my parents, you know, I wanted to tell stories at that point. I grew really passionate about script writing or whatever. It was you know, whether my parents saw me as a lost cause or not. So when I was in 10th grade, they actually got me into the local community college in Maryland because we moved near Baltimore. And then I started taking video editing classes, and I just made off the same camera that I use for my skate videos. I use this editing system called the Matrox, which was like this, you know, A to B VCR system. And I did a World's AIDS Day back in 1999 when I was a junior in high school, taking a community college course with college kids. And I got my first paycheck at the age of 19. That was a $500. They bought my video out so they can use it for an intro of like MTV 1999 for
Oh,
World.
you're rich.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was raking it in, dude. But it took me about 2 years to get that check. So anyway. And then I went to Valencia Community College in Central Florida in Orlando when the film program director at that time, his name was a gentleman by the name of Ralph Clemente. And I was, you know, shopping around for 4-year courses, whether it was like NYU, UCLA, and for those of you watching, it doesn't matter where you go to school. That's always my 2 cents. It really doesn't. Yeah, I can get some nods in these AD land here. But the reality is I met this gentleman, and the film program was like a low budget studio, so to speak. So anybody with $500,000 and above would utilize the students as their free labor. The only thing they had to do was hire keys, department heads, and, you know, feed the students. And then they'd get like, you know, grip package, a lighting package, 16 and, you know, 32 millimeter camera package with lenses and everything. So for independent filmmakers, it was an enticing prospect. And I was in that program. And I met a gentleman by the name of Smithy Sipes, who was a production producer for local commercials. And I was interviewing as a student AD because they did a 3-day crash course on Movie Magic 3.5, I think. And I was the only one that took notes and paid attention. So I built some strips, added some synopsis, and he's like, "You're the AD." And then that gentleman, and I had no, it was for it was like a Make-A-Wish Foundation project. This is 2002, 2001. And Smithy was there with the director, who was a local production coordinator, which was my access to the film industry. Because then I impressed him in the interview, and I'll try and summarize it. But then he called me out of the blue while I'm in film school to go PA a Ron John Surf Shop commercial. But by PA, it was like, here's the camera and shoot behind the scenes. And I always tell this story because it's kind of close to the heart, where I remember going, it was the set, it was, they were using a Titan crane at the time because they were doing driving shots, which was really kind of crazy for, you know, those of you who know what a Titan crane is. But they were doing some driving, going along, and I remember just showing up and they're like, "Here's a camera, shoot behind the scenes." But when I went, I did my hair, I wore Doc Martens to look cool, I wore khakis, and I wore a colored shirt with long sleeves. Now in Florida summer heat, that's really stupid. And but I didn't know any better at the time. But the one thing I learned out of that day, which impressed the then Ron John Surf Shop commercial, was that I didn't do what I was told to do. I actually put the camera down, and, you know, the AD on the show or in the commercial was having trickiness, you know, cueing 1s to 2s with the picture car and frame. So I just used common sense, went to the other end and was like, standing by, I think I'm here. Let me know when you want me to go. And I used all the wrong terminology at the time, but what mattered at that point was I put the camera down and I saw what needed to be done and I did it. And on top of that, you know, people were hot, so you hand out waters. And so from that job, my PA career flourished.
Yeah, that's one thing I always talk to PAs about is acting and not reacting, you know, and just having some initiative as well as just seeing what is needed to be done in the moment, even if you don't know what the hell you're doing, but you know, just notice that sort of thing. Nate P, same question for you. Do you want me to repeat it, or you how you got into it, love for film or whatnot?
Yeah. Did I have a love for film before I got in there? I've always liked movies, always liked TV, you know, always had like I guess a paranoid eye for detail. However, did I think about it before I got into it? Absolutely not. I was actually I had a friend whose mom signed her up to be a featured extra in a movie. She didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't know what it was. And they had arranged for her to have a fitting. And she asked, could I come and be her chaperone? And I was like, sure, there might be some weirdos there, you know, I'll watch your back. So I came, we went and, you know, it was hundreds of people there. The costumes department was running people in and out, in and out. And I noticed that everybody in the costume department had some type of style. You know, no matter how eclectic it was, you could like it, not like it, but they all had a style, each individual person. And when we were leaving, we got in the elevator and this dude jumps on the elevator and he was dressed like shit. And I was like, it was drastically different than the costume department. And I was like, are you like the janitor here? And he was like, no, I'm not. I'm an assistant director. And I was like, oh, so you get like coffee and apples and oranges for the director. He's like, no, I don't. That's a director's assistant. I run the set. And, you know, he was a little amped up. And I kind of like stepped back and we looked at each other and we started laughing. And we just had a quick conversation in the elevator. By the time that we got out the elevator, he was like, have you ever thought about being in the movie industry? And I was like, no, but yeah, you know, everybody's thought about it, but not for real. And he was like, why don't you come out with your friend? And if you like it, I'll give you a job. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I came out, I liked it. He gave me a job. And, you know, I started my PA career from there. I think I probably PA'd for about maybe 3.5 years. I did all 600 days, turned in my book. I got a call saying I needed 20 more days. They kicked back 20. So I did all 20, but on my 19th day, you know how you get the call sheet like right before, you get the call sheet the day before. So I still had one day to do. And I was in the UPS office, FedEx, faxing it off. And the lady called me and she was like, hey, we're doing approvals right now. You know, do you have all the call sheets? I was like, yeah, I'm faxing them off right now. She's like, all right, great. Sent them off. I went to set. And when I got there, the key came to me and was like, can you be an AD? Is your book turned in? And I was like, I just turned it in, you know, like they're doing approvals. She was like, call the DGA right now and see if you can AD because the first AD is sick and he's leaving and everybody's bumping up and we need somebody to be the second. And I was like, oh. So I called the DGA and she was like, oh, I was just gonna let you know that they approved you. And I was like, so I can work today? She was like, yeah, you can work today. And like, oh, this is great. I was so happy. Like I felt great. Yeah. And I went and I signed the paperwork real quick, the DGA deal memo. I was the second. So technically I had 599 days.
Totally funny.
I was going to add that question to the thing. So glad you brought that up, Nate. You were smart enough to like keep your paperwork. Like I did all this stuff, you know, back in the 90s and stuff. And I had to go back and like, I was calling producers from movies like directly going, oh, do you have any of this stuff? And they're all really nice and got it back to me. But turning in that book's a thing. And then, you know, paying the money to upgrade and all that mess. So Ben, same thing for you, my friend. How'd you get started? Love for movies. What was your origin story?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always loved movies growing up and loved TV shows, and just as a fan. And I started getting into watching all the behind the scenes. You know, if I had the DVD, I'd always watch the special features and love the commentaries, and you know, just couldn't get enough of that. I actually went to college for music, though. You know, I wanted a music scholarship and you know studied that for a while. But I
Really?
think I think I knew I wanted to work in movies pretty seriously in college, but I had no idea what that really meant. So I applied for grad school, got on the wait list to USC producing program out in LA. And I figured, you know, if I get off this wait list, I don't want to like suddenly have to drop everything and move to LA. I was living in Atlanta at the time. So I moved out there, couch surfing with, you know, a friend of my dad's from college, and didn't know the AD department even existed, but it turned out that guy's couch I was crashing on was a first AD, and was actively working on a show. And he's like, knew I was looking for jobs in like development or at the studio or something, just kind of like an internship for the summer while I waited to see if I was going to be in college anymore. And he said, you know, I don't know if you really would be interested in this, but like you're welcome to come to set and like watch if you want to like, you know, see what we do. And so I, you know, came to set and suddenly, you know, realized like how exciting that world was. It was, you know, just a sort of middle of the road ABC family drama. Like it wasn't like some big action movie or anything. But to me, like having never seen that world before, it was just like instantly exciting and engaging and, you know, fascinating in so many different ways just because it was so unfamiliar. But you're seeing all these really professional, you know, creative, interesting people all working, you know, and doing their jobs, you know, together. And so I basically took that invitation as tacit approval to come every single day. So I showed up after lunch, so they weren't feeding me, but I'd stayed till wrap. So I got the call sheet with like the map. This is back when we had like paper maps stapled to call sheets and would like know where they were going to be the next day. And so, you know, eventually somebody got sick and had to go home. And this is like after like I've been there for like a couple of weeks, and they're like, "Well, how bad could you be? Here's a walkie," you know. And so I held a door shut for the first 5 days. They could have just fixed the door; it swung open, let light and sound in, but you know, I basically just like held this door shut with my foot for several days, but could listen to the walkie and understand the language and start to pick up the lingo. And yeah, I mean, luckily I fell into the department that I wanted to be in. You know, I've always been really uh, responded well to organizing things and to planning things. It's one of the reasons I like key seconding so much is that I love the prep and I love the organization. As much of a as impossible it can be sometimes and challenging it can be, it's a good fit for my personality and for my skill set. And it was a good match from the start. I always liked the department. I liked the teamwork aspect of it. It felt like so many, as a newcomer to LA who was trying to sort of break into the development side of things, this was a place where it felt like there was a team who are all pulling in the same direction as opposed to everyone just looking out for number one above all. And so I really responded to that. And yeah, no, just like you say about collecting those days, you know, my key second on that show said, you know, I don't know if you want to do this for one day or for the rest of your life, but keep everything. So you don't have to go back and try and make your book later. And so, you know, about 50 days, 100 days in, you know, I sort of realized, you know, maybe I could do this. And so, yeah, you know, collected my 600 days, turned them in, became a second AD, moved back to Atlanta where all the work was at that point. Because, you know, as you may or may not know, when you join the Directors Guild out of LA, you can't work in Los Angeles at first. You have to go out of town and then collect AD days before you can be eligible to work back in Los Angeles. And I think a lot of people I knew as an LAPA were sort of viewed that as like, you know, you got to do your time. You got to go do your penance somewhere else. You know, you'll go to New Mexico or Florida or Michigan or North Carolina because there's so many different markets at the time. In 2012, this was. Now it's, you know, it's like just a couple other states you might go to, but I think I picked the right one. I'm going back to Georgia. You know, it's funny, JD, I met you and John Bond on the same show. It was Hall Pass in 2010. And that was, I was living in LA. I came out back to Atlanta to do this show in Atlanta and met all the people who are now like my colleagues and like some of my closest friends on that movie. And so when it came time to go to the third area, I was like, well, I know people in Atlanta. I can probably get a job with one of them. You know, some ADs go out of town to get their days and then get back to LA as rapidly as possible. But I'm still here, you know, 12 years later and not going anywhere.
You did Sweet Magnolia back in 2012 when you moved back, right? Didn't you run base camp for Dan? Yeah, it was like Dan.
No, it wasn't Sweet Magnolia. It was the Steel Magnolias. Yes, yeah.
Steel Magnolia. Yeah.
That was my first job back. It was my last PA job. That was actually my only PA job running base camp. I think I said, might have been to you. or
Yeah,
Renee Dan,
I
but I said
remember.
like you got to let me like do this one time because I'm about to join the guild and never run base camp. I got to do it. So yeah,
That was
it was a
awesome.
fun, it was a fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hall Pass was kind of like my gateway drug into firsting features. And I think you
yeah.
jumped, forget me on as the second or the second unit first. That was great. That was a good time.
That was so many moons ago, dude.
Yeah.
That was a fun group, man.
Well, here's one back at you for everybody. JD Taylor is the reason why I'm in the Directors Guild, because he gave me my very, 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 very first Directors Guild of America job, and he took a chance on me from PAing into ADing, and he almost didn't because of some bullshit recommendation from some guy in Florida who I just happened to make mad. Remember that?
I was like, fuck that.
But I think the lesson in that is like what goes around comes around, I suppose, you know. It's and karma and having good chi is a good aspect of everything.
Yeah, and becoming a good second, that's when it gets difficult for me, because every time I like call is like, it used to be John Bond all the time, like, hey, you know, you available? Always damn busy. So that's how I got to meet other people like, you know, Ben and Rawls, who's not here, and Steve.
Thanks for being busy, John Bon. Appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to be part of this forum of like excellent.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? This is awesome. I finally get to meet all these names JD's been talking shit about for all these years.
I know.
Right, exactly.
All my favorite dipshits, as I said.
And you don't do this like John Bon does. All right, no.
All right, Nate G, same question for you. Do you need me to repeat it, or you is kind of your origin story, if you will?
I've been thinking about my answer while everyone else has been talking. I haven't been listening.
Same.
I actually grew up in LA, and but my family wasn't in the business. We were all working class people down in San Pedro, but we were, you know, Hollywood adjacent, and they were always shooting down in San Pedro. I remember like one of the first things I remember shooting was Fear Factor. Every time Fear Factor was shooting down there, I'd be one of the looky-loos. I would go down and just stare and watch everyone work. So yeah, as long as I can remember, I wanted to work in show business. And then I wasn't the best student in high school, so I wasn't able to get into like UCSB, USC. I wasn't able to get in, but you know who did accept me? The University of New Mexico. So I went out to Albuquerque, and I was thinking about getting like a practical degree. I got a degree in urban planning and political science, because I was thinking there was some backup there. But throughout college, I was an extra, stand-in, and out on the various productions out there. And that was a tiny market. I mean, there were like a couple of teams working at a time. And I remember there was this one AD, I was a stand-in on this show, The Lone Ranger. It was like this movie with Johnny Depp and Corbin. It was a huge, big Disney movie that nobody saw. But I remember I went up to the AD and I was like, hey, I want to do this. Like, I want to be part of this. Help me out. Help me get in. And she was like, okay, cool, whatever. And then like a year later, she called me and offered me like a set PA job because one of the set PAs went to rehab. So she was calling me, and then I became the background PA on my very first show. It was a Mel Gibson movie. God, I forget. Bloodfather. It was called Bloodfather. Same thing. Nobody watched it. But it was like a Taken knockoff. There was you know, like that was the storyline. It was an action movie out in the desert. And then I've been working ever since in the business. But yeah, there was like a brief period of time like high school and college where I didn't think that I would work in the business, but then I did. And then I worked out in Albuquerque for a while and then got bored of that and then moved to Atlanta. I just followed an AD out here. And then JD, I met you. That was my first TV show in Atlanta, was Doom Patrol, and you were the first AD on that. And then I turned in my book on safety, and you and Ben both gave me my first AD day. And I've been, yeah. I remember I remember I was getting eligible on the show, and then once I was eligible, you guys gave me a day right away. It was like a normal day, but you gave it to me. It was really nice.
Yeah. I remember Ben saying, hey, we should give Nate this, you know, his first name. Like, yeah, we should.
Yeah. It was like right away. It was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
And then, yeah, I mean, ever since I've just been kind of mostly working here. There was a brief period of time when I was on that, you know, CQL where you could work elsewhere as a local, where I went out and did that show with you guys out in Texas and Oklahoma as an additional AD. And yeah, it was a second on one of the Clint Eastwood movies out in New Mexico, but that was a similar situation where I was just on the CQL, so they let me work anywhere.
I remember when you got that, I was so proud of you. That was awesome.
Yeah, yeah, that was good times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've kind of always wanted to do it.
Cool. I'm gonna and now I'm gonna ask Christophe about his origin story as well. Christophe.
I was born and grew up in France, and just a bit challenging to come over and move to the US. But it started mostly with the love of photography. I had my first camera when I was 11, and I started taking a lot of pictures. And then I got interested in films, and specifically there was one detonator, if I can say that. There was an exhibit in the city I was living in Le Havre in Normandy, and there was an exhibit about filmmaking. And it was really well done, explained everything. And then there was a big set there, like a big cave. And I walked into the cave, and crossing that threshold, all of a sudden you imagine like you're in another world. And it was that imagination. All of a sudden you're still there, but in a completely different world. And that was just created an absolute passion about movie making and building things to tell a story that are just completely it's crazy when you think about it, but putting all these people together. So that was the starter, what started the fire. And then I went to film school in Paris for 3 years, which is a university, a lot of theory, film history, which is important. And critics and writing and all of that. And then I had the opportunity. The films at the time I was passionate about were mostly science fiction films, like Alien, the first one, or Blade Runner. These films are films that made me dream. All of a sudden you were in a theater for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you were transported into another world. And that I got totally addicted to that. So all these films were done, by U.S. studios. So I had, my goal was to come over to the U.S. and start a career, which was rather difficult in so many ways. Because first of all, I wasn't a very good student. My parents were like, I want to go, to Hollywood and make movies. They looked at me like,
what?
That's the universal parental look, if I may agree with you, sir.
Pretty much. The challenge is there is a healthy film industry in France, but when you looked at the numbers back then, it's about 75 to 80% unemployment. So of course, as a parent, I would imagine that people are like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But I had the opportunity to come and work in the US legally. And then I first moved to New York, and I looked for film work in New York, which, some of the studios, some of the production companies have, offices there, but they all told me, go to LA, go to LA, go to LA. So then moved to Los Angeles, started working as a production assistant in commercials, did quite a few of commercials. I did all my days, probably 600 days in commercials, and then joined the guild as a second in commercials, then on to feature films, and that's been ever since then. I've been very, very lucky. It's a lot of hard work. A lot of people watching from the outside have this image of Hollywood and actors and all this money and this and that, without realizing how hard it is, how tough of a job ADing is, which is great. But yeah, telling stories, helping a director, telling his story, managing all of that is just great fun, with all of the moments of frustration that we all go through. I've often described being a key second AD as being the front desk manager of a luxury resort for millionaires with issues.
That's funny. Christophe, I have like a question here for you. It says, explain the second AD position. And I don't even think I need to, you just nailed it in that description, but I may have you expand on that. Oh, that's great. Now, a lot of kids and PAs and stuff that are first getting in the business have this fear of failure, as I did. I'm sure we all did, or fear of making a mistake or doing something wrong and all that kind of thing. So I just wanted to ask you guys, do you remember like, and I'll start with Christophe and go backwards. So, you know, do you remember like when you were first starting out, like some big mistake that you thought was going to be the end of all things that you did, you know, because none of us are perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, just to give some people some hope. Hope.
Well, overall, which is something that has never happened to me yet. The worst you can do as a second is forget an actor, forget to give a call time to an actor, and then the actor does not show up. That's the worst. The other thing is, it's more like crew related. I think I remember my first movie as a Q was Ladder 49, which was a big FX movie, complicated with multiple, cameras all over the place. And I actually brought in an operator where he shouldn't have been there. So that was my what have I done, these kind of things. And then logistics as well, working very, closely with the locations department, because that film was so complicated with a lot of fire and a lot of effects. But yeah, not talking to a department about something specific, something that might change and that is not necessarily on paper. Mm-hmm. That's where the traps are. So
it's not on the call sheet, so I'm like,
So the communication is absolute. That's the A. That's so important, because there is a script, yes, there's a schedule, there's a shooting schedule, et cetera. But on a daily basis, you just have to iron everything out. Just go talk to people. It makes the film a more pleasant experience when you establish relationships with the people you're going to be working with for months and months, and in an intense fashion. But there's this one thing I would think of. There's for either key second or first for that matter, there's a formula. It's WWWH. What, when, where, how. When you have that,
I'm writing that down.
That's good.
Don't have to think about the why, just what, where, when, how.
That's it. That gives you everything. Just ask yourself those questions when you read the scenes, and it all trickles down from there.
Yeah. The call sheet's always a scary thing for me, man. When I was seconding, I remember there's a couple mistakes I made, and I'll just open them up about them. Like when I was seconding and I put the wrong continuity day on one of the things, and then costumes was all like, oh, we have in the wrong wardrobe because it was in continuity. But there needs to be some checks and balances, and that's what I always like have my crew. That's why I always say I'm no important than the base camp PA or the background PA or whatever. We're, in my mind, we're all evil as well, but equal. And then there's the checks and balances. So it's like one of the big mistakes I made on Nate, the film you and I did, Mr. Patterson, in Savannah, was I forgot to add an actor's number to the breakdown strip on the movie Magic strip. So we went to do this scene, and it was like, where is Brad? We need him for this scene. But at the same time, I hope my second AD is reading the script pages and sees in the breakdown, when he builds his call sheet or her call sheet, that, oh, dude, JD, don't you need Brad for this? And we're like, oh, God, thank you. Yes. So I always ask my PAs that too. I'll say, okay, let's bring Holland and Tyler and Dylan to set, and they'll be like, well, don't you need Steve too? I'm like, oh shit, yeah, him as well. So I'm not perfect. But that was one of the big mistakes I made. And also, I think once on Teen Wolf, I wrapped a stunt guy who had to drive all the way 45 minutes back to Atlanta to go home. And then I realized, oh shit, I have one more stunt. So I had to call him and ask him to come back. And I felt really bad about that. So mistakes happen. You just learn from them and move on. Nate Galesic, I always pronounce your last name wrong.
And it's okay. There hasn't been a single person my entire life. I don't think
I've learned how to pronounce it today. I've been saying it wrong all these years.
Say it again.
Okay.
Say it again.
It's pronounced Galesic. But like I made a creative decision at one point. I was like, I'm not going to Americanize this. I'm going to just say it the way my ancestors said it. But nobody, phonetically, it doesn't make sense.
I got it. Ben, you got it?
I'm ready. I wrote it down.
All right, yeah.
Okay, so I think that the original question was like getting started, like what did you mess up? And I was just thinking about this like lockup that I blew like on like maybe my 5th day as a set PA. They told me my lockup and I misinterpreted it. So the first thing, like the actors are like coming through this set and it's like this like museum. And I'm just in the frame, like just solidly like locking up right there, like at their end mark. And we had to cut the camera. It was so embarrassing. And I remember just feeling mortified, like literally mortified for the rest of the show. But nowadays, like, I'm like, what? Who cares? Do another take. But I remember at the time that was the most mortifying, horrifying thing ever. Like just
But it's
ruining.
because you're new and you think the whole world's going to fall because of that one thing.
Exactly. Yeah,
Although
no, I remember like
sometimes a mistake, the whole world will fall because of one thing.
Oh yeah, and like guaranteed, if you asked anybody on that set, do you remember that? They'll say no. Like,
yeah,
it's like no, because we did 20 more takes after that.
Yeah, but it's burning your head.
Exactly.
I know. It took me years to finally let stuff go like that, man. Years.
Right.
I'm still working on it.
I don't know about you guys, but you remember your like failures so much more than your successes sometimes, right? Like I'm still thinking about the thing I wish I'd said to that key grip 9 years ago. I can't let it go, you know? I had a great response for that, but no, you're right. It's totally magnified. And sometimes, you know, you just have to go catch your own mistakes as best you can, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're kind of flowing into the part of the conversation where I'd like us to more play off of each other. So don't feel like, you know, if somebody's talking, you can't like interject or anything.
Yeah.
So Ben, biggest mistake when you started out? You mentioned something.
I think I was just really happy to be there when I first started out as a PA. You know, I knew I didn't know anything, and so I sort of compensated for that by just like being the guy who's going to get everybody water, you know, or just like trying to like be as like you say active as possible, which I'm sure I stepped in it all the time. I'm sure I overstepped my position. I had to be told by someone, don't move that cast chair unless you tell props. Just, you know, we're in LA again. A lot of this, you know, the union guys in LA are very, very particular. And I've learned to ask people before I moved anything. But as an AD, I mean, I feel like there's always an element of learning your way into any of these positions. I sort of mentioned before that, like, you know, when I came as a PA, you sort of learn how to do the job ahead of you when you learn how to be a key set PA and then learn how to be like a second AD, for instance, because those jobs are often very similar. But like, you know, no one really taught me how to be a key second. I sort of learned by osmosis, and I was really fortunate that the first job I key seconded on was perfectly fine show, but not a ton of producerial oversight. And so I found myself catching my own mistakes a lot of the times before like somebody else was really mad about them. So that was really lucky. It was really lucky to be in a sort of safe space to learn, I guess. And also relatively, I mean, the consequences are always high for obviously big stuff like forgetting an actor or, you know, bringing in someone who's not supposed to be there. I remember pretty early on, I brought a techno crane in, like, I just misunderstood what scene it was for. I brought it in like 3 hours too late. And like, I have to then unfortunately watch them like try and repurpose a condor with a camera on it for something that's totally inappropriate. So, you know, you learn how as a key second, your mistakes can have a magnified impact on a shooting day. And so, you know, it's sort of what you said before, you know, we're all human, we're all fallible. But there's an analogy that I really like, another AD told me, where like the best AD teams are kind of like Swiss cheese, where one person's strengths may compensate for someone else's, you know, something where it's not quite their wheelhouse. And it's like, I really feel like that's really, really true. We're always just looking out for each other, trying to catch each other's mistakes. You know, it's one of the reasons, like, I really love if I'm handing out a prelim, like I'm watching the PAs read it and look at the details. And I try and tell them, I mean, I know it's hard to tell your boss, like, hey, is this correct here? Or you may have made a mistake. But like, I really wanted to feel like it's an open space to say, hey, is this correct? Because I can absolutely make mistakes, whether they're just typos or, you know, straight up incorrect, you know, day numbers, like you say, you know. So the more eyes on it, the better, I like to think.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, because to itemize an example of which happened this past Thursday, you know, the mental Tetris of it all gets kind of tricky, because my first AD, TK Sham, right now, and myself talked about 61 part 2, for instance, on this scene. And one part of it was on Thursday and the other part of it was on the following Tuesday. And then he took part 2, a portion of it, and merged it with part 1, which took our lead actor into 60.1 part 2 and put it in at 61 part 1. And the mistake was actually on his end, which was a mental Tetris issue, because on Thursday, and it was quickly fixed, but it just kind of comes to show the human fallibility of the entire experience, is that he dismissed number one before we got to that scene because in his head, he was 2 versions behind. But as the key second AD, it was like, hey, we talked to and it's also like how you catch the mistake and how you verbalize it. Because it wasn't like, hey, TK, it's your, you talked about this. And then my response to him dismissing him from the set was I immediately remembered our conversation. I was like, hey, did we add him back into 61 part 2, or is this something we want to rethink? Because the latest conversation was this, and he's like, oh no, he's not wrapped, so it's also like how you verbalize the mistake to make sure that a person doesn't get defensive, which is part of the art of being a key second AD, is the art of vernacular and how you approach things, because the most disliked key second ADs are the ones that make people feel defensive, which is why there could be kind of like a line in the sand with a lot of departments. But if you use a correct vernacular, use the right tone and the right vibe and energy when you approach it, then people come out at the other end and the solution is still found. That's what
yeah, and I always say, like, being an AD is or a PA or anything in the production department is like being a psychiatrist in a way, being able to talk to the different departments in different ways and know how they'll react to how you're speaking and just adjusting your tone. You guys are all really good at that. Christophe is really, really good at that. I don't know how he deals with some.
I got good vibes from Christophe out the gate.
And the another thing that
I do know that.
Another thing I think is really important too is to own up to your mistakes. Like if you fuck up, immediately.
No, never blame someone else. Always blame
someone. Or don't hold it in forever and try to fix it on your own. I've made numerous mistakes in the past, and I'll just go to the producer right away and go, look, dude, sorry, this happened. Here's and then try to have a fix. Have a fix or already, even if it's a shitty fix, if it's not right, just start saying, okay, look, I did this, but I think we can do this to remedy it or whatnot. So,
and you'd be surprised at how many people are okay with the mistake once you admit it versus trying to pass the blame. I made it
totally
when on this past show, and it wasn't major. Our main actors like to get pumped before they're on camera on their shirtless scene. So I had a shirtless scene breakdown, and I forgot the physical trainer to get them pumped before the day. And this was on Friday, and they worked on Monday. And then it was like, oh, hey, line producer, first AD, production supervisor, I forgot to add this to the call sheet. I gave them a 2 p.m. call time to amend it. Let me know if this forum disagrees. If not, he'll show up at 2. And that was it. Solution, conversations ended. And yeah, it was my fault, but they understand the human aspect. So I totally agree.
Yeah, I'm gonna start jumping ahead a little bit. Just I was looking at the time because I could talk to you guys for 5 hours, but I'm sure people are busy. There's blue call sheets. So we should probably get into the roles of what we do specifically. So I'll just start off. So as a first, I like to say I'm either like an XO on a ship to the captain, and or a foreman on a job site. Whereas, speaking like the analogy, foreman on a job site, you have to take all the different departments of building a house, where you're laying foundation, electricians, putting the thing in, the plumbing getting in, or the carpenters doing their stuff, or the finishing work, and schedule it in a manner that makes sense to build the house. So I'm basically building a house. At the same time, I'm kind of the XO on a ship with the captain. I'm his right hand. Somebody mentioned earlier, it's like I think it was Nate when he was talking about, oh, I'm an assistant director. Oh, okay, you get coffee and stuff. I'm like, no, it's actually a bigger job than that. You're actually running the whole thing. So it's basically I take the script, I break it down into little chunks of pieces, which are the scenes and or the parts sometimes, like John Bon was mentioning, of scenes, and then I figure out the most logical way to shoot it schedule wise, taking in so many variables that. And then you'll get a perfect schedule, and you'll find out an actor's not available on Mondays, and it all goes to shit. And then you're running the set, you're doing the safety meetings, you're telling everybody what's going on. You're basically setting the tone for the shoot. So if you're an asshole, it's going to be an anxiety-ridden set. If you're laid back and when things go awry and you can remain calm, like all you guys are really good at doing, and I hope I am too at times, that's kind of my role. So let's go into the second AD's role. I think I'll go to Christophe. for that question, but you guys can also interject, but I'll just like, so who is the key second AD and what is his or her role on a film?
Well, it's a management position. You get, from your schedule that you've done, then we deal with the cast, but also all of the other departments. And basically the goal being providing on a daily basis all of the elements that are needed for the director, to shoot his film, timely fashion. The timing is real important, but also it's also very important to look in the future, look forward, look what's going to happen tomorrow, the day after, the week after that, the week after, what it means for all of the departments, how much prep do they need. So it's a lot of information that has to, be constantly, circulating. And then of course, dealing with the makeup, hair, and the cast, and their issues, always. But being able to do it in a very diplomatic fashion so that people continue working with you and not trying to, create conflicts, because conflicts, then it's just all the wheels stop turning and it becomes a war. And I'm sure we've all been through that, and it's no fun at all. So yeah, managing, the daily elements, provide the director and the first AD on set of all the elements needed on time. That's the key.
And sometimes you use the term Johnny Tomorrow because it's like, I set the plan as the first AD, and the second AD implements the plan, and they're always thinking about the next day. I'm in the day, and they're always thinking about next day and the ramifications thereof.
Exactly. When I get on set, like tomorrow, I'll be on set here in Atlanta, and that day to me is already the past.
Well, you turned it on to me, so it's my world to fuck it up after you've said.
You're describing the role of first AD, but it's basically it's conductor. You're the conductor on set.
Yeah, and you're the composer.
We have to set the table for everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Basically, yeah. So that's the management role, and that's it's enjoyable if you like organizational skills. But the very, very important part is that you need a really good working relationship with your first AD. And I've been lucky enough, to work with you, JD, on that one show, but worked with other ADs. One of them I've worked for 25 years now.
Wow.
And the connection, it's to a point where you're so comfortable working with that first AD that you just, what call time you want to do, what time you want to be ready to shoot. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know the person so well that you know what's needed, you know what the timing is going to be. That's the absolute best solution. And then I've had, other, first ADs where it just doesn't work. And it's normal. It's a human component in what we do,
Mm-hmm.
You have to get along, and you have to, blend in. Like some people, it's a matter of personality. You can't do it. Sometimes it doesn't work, and when it doesn't work, it's bad, because then you start making mistakes. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
I find myself hiring personality over experience a lot of times. Just, am I going to be able to live with this person for 3 or 4 months and get along with them?
Have you ever
together 15, 16 hours a day? We got to be able to stand each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Steve, Windle, you could probably relate to me and my response to this just because you went to Greece with JD. But I find the key second AD as the air traffic controller of precision guesswork. I can't imagine what it was. I've never shot internationally, so I'm curious about your experience with JD on that one, Steve. But the second assistant director, for all those watching, I find is just the substantiated air traffic controller to itemize during COVID, for instance, which our chairs, and maybe some of you agree or disagree, got 80% harder because of the advent of COVID and air traffic controller. Because not only do we have to see ahead, look at the schedule, look at the fitting schedule, look at the cast arrivals. If you're on distant location, you have to know when to bring the actor in, but then you have to bring the actor in that's cheap enough but yet for costumes to have enough time to have a fitting, have a tailor, have a check fit, and then shoot. And then if that person has special effects makeup, making sure the special effects makeup department has a crack at that performer as well. And then on top of that, telling the performer that they're going to get 3 hours of special effects makeup if they don't already know, so all those things have to get communicated. I'm curious about Steve, how did you manage your air traffic control for JD in Greece?
Well, he was the second, and Matt Rawls was the second. So,
oh, gotcha.
If Rawls was here,
I just sat
I know.
back and let it happen.
I know the hardest thing was the kid. There's so many kids in the movie in different age groups because it was like a family that grew up.
Yeah.
And the child labor laws in Greece are so different.
Are they harder than like California state labor laws?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they
like
really?
20 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nuts. But we got some waivers and stuff, and we kind of, we had doubles for the actors and when we could. But I remember that was one of Matt's hardest things to navigate, I believe.
Well, some ages weren't even allowed to be on camera.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Like 3 and under weren't allowed to be there.
Like,
yeah, it was nuts. So, let's get into the role of the second. So I'm going to turn it to the Nates and to Steve, and you guys can sort of speak amongst yourselves because I'd love everybody involved in this. Second for me is a very important position because they need to be able to run the set as a first. If I need to step away or have to work on a schedule or whatever like that. And sometimes the second is more of a path to first AD and the second AD, but I could be wrong. So anyway, Steve, Nate, or all three of you guys, or talk at once, or how you want to.
I think the biggest thing is we're kind of like the buffer and filter. For you, if you want to think of it kind of like a wheel, like the first AD is definitely like the axle or the hub, and then we're kind of we're just making sure that nothing. I don't know. You get dumb questions all the time. I mean, maybe they're not dumb questions, but they're stuff that you don't need to worry about. And I will take it. We will take it, and distribute it. And I remember there were some days where JD, you were like, we would bring stuff up afterward at rap or something, and you were like, I had no idea that even happened that day.
Which is great.
We're always putting out fires because you got all this other stuff you got to worry about, and we're there to make it go as smooth for you as possible. Yeah, it would definitely a strainer, a filter, or whatever you want to call it.
Nate Patterson, what is like the specific roles on set as a second that you I know you're second ADing a lot, but you did second quite a bit for me. So and go.
I think as a second, I think second role a lot is like the executioner, to make sure that business is handled and everything, and to be forward thinking, like, what would the first AD need? Supplement him or her in that situation, to be always forward thinking, to make the job easier for the first AD on set. If the first AD is going to need background for this next scene, the second needs to make sure that background is getting ready and is ready by the time the second AD needs them. I think, the first AD needs them. Communicating with base camp for the first AD, just a lot of taking the weight off of the first AD as much as possible.
Galesic?
Galesic? Yeah, I'll take it from
Galesic.
Here. Thank you.
Galesic. I'm gonna have your name right. Galesic.
Galesic.
I've never met you, but I'll get it right. I promise you, Galesic.
Trust me, I've been called much worse. But no, it's like the epitome of middle management. Like, you have your first AD, your key second AD, and that they're really the ones that implement the plan. And then you kind of have to go in and execute it. So that's like the most challenging part, you're getting the plan. Like, you're oftentimes not the one creating the plan, but a lot of times, you're asked for input and prep and stuff like that. And then you're also in charge, mostly directly in charge of the set production assistants. I'm like their immediate boss, right? Like the set PAs mostly report to me, and then obviously all the other ADs as well. But I'm kind of like their direct boss that I mostly give them instructions. And usually we have a great team, and, you know, instructions aren't constantly necessary. And then creatively, you know, like, I guess it just depends on the job, but I've always taken a very creative approach to the job of second AD. I obsess over the frame. I love everything that goes, any element that is going on camera, I start to just kind of like, you know, make myself the manager of indirectly.
That's a good segue. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say a big part of that is the background performers. You know, that's really like, you know, officially the second's job is to manage and direct the background performers on camera. But, you know, like you can do that, but, you know, not think about like, oh, well, maybe this table would look a little bit better shifted this way. Or, you know, like, oh, you know, this scene is going to require protest signs or stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like any type of element that is going on camera, I also like to incorporate because it's relevant. You know, if you're just giving the extras direction, walk from right to left, you know, you're not really telling a very compelling story. And I like to, you know, tell a very compelling story with the shot.
Well, it's fun. I mean, you got a lot of, because also like when a camera breaks off, like you get that opportunity usually to run it and shoot some stuff, and it's I don't know, there's a lot of different little things that you get to do. I mean, I like it because then also you're kind of not taking the work home with you at night, which is kind of fun too. It's like it's nice, you can get a little bit more sleep, but it's yeah, I mean you're kind of doing everything. It's
or your Sundays invaded.
The cool thing also about second and Nate is the background placement, because that's where you actually, that was my first gig, that I was a background PA, and I was fresh out of film school, and I got to direct, man, because you're directing talent, which is the background. You're giving them things to do. Like, instead of just saying walk here to here, I'm like, okay, you guys were arguing because he parked the car in the wrong place, just to give them a little something.
Oh, it helps the day go by.
You really have to pee really bad, so you're in a hurry, you know. So Nate, you and Steve, I mean, but you specifically have been one of the best background placers that I've had. No offense to the rest of you guys, he's got the skills, man. But
I've never seen anything like it, to be honest with you.
What?
Me neither.
How do you do it, man? I mean, how do you make it work? And do you have any sort of like any little, what's the word for it, gimmicks or little skills things?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I've got a lot of gimmicks. So the number one gimmick that I often do is I engage the extras in the frame lines. I like very much like tell them concisely, like, where are the frame lines in the scene? And I tell them, you know, like the worst thing that can happen is like you get blocked by someone, like help me like fill up the frame. And then they're all like very aware, and like, you know, I run it way more like a team as opposed to individuals. You know what I mean? I'm not like,
you get them involved.
Don't pay attention to Sarah. I'm like, pay attention to what Sarah's doing and compliment that, or do something different. You know what I mean? And like,
you give ownership to them. They become part of the process. They become
100%. 100%. In between every setup, we huddle. We just huddle up. I tell them, great job. You can use the restroom if you need to. Who wants some water? But like mostly, like, it's not like go to holding. It's like huddle up. We're going to talk about the next setup. And then they'll help me to like divide up like who I need. Like, for example, if I'm like shooting a restaurant scene, you know, while we're shooting, you know, this way, they all are going to know who's in this guy's coverage. And then when we're shooting this way, they all know, oh no, you need Daniel. Daniel's missing. I'm like, okay, great. Where's Daniel? But like, the more involved that they are, the better. That's definitely my biggest gimmick. And
yeah,
just,
I mean,
you know, just make good creative decisions.
Yeah, this is like big for me. And any new PA that's going to deal with background, they got to have fun, man. Make them have fun. Make them be 100%. Part of it. Because if they're part of it and they have fun and you remember their names, like Steve Windle is really good about remembering names. I don't know how he does it. But if you know who they are, or you mess with just one or whatever like that, and you just make them part of it and they have fun, they will bend over backwards for you.
Oh my God, it's so true.
They'll hold off on that coffee break so that they can get another, but 100%. a lot of ADs and PAs just treat the background like shit. And it just makes the process so much harder. And it's the same thing for the crew too. I try to make it fun for the crew, because it's I always tell people, I'm like, you know, this job is hard enough and it's supposed to be fun. We got into it because we
Would
love
you guys ever do, as a floor runner, would you guys ever do DGA theater? I always called it DGA theater, where you like read the sides and extras holding everybody so they kind of know the scene ahead of time. I mean,
100%.
Always.
Yeah,
I call it
100%.
story time.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and like, you know, sometimes it's more relevant than others. You know, like if we're shooting a restaurant scene, like the characters don't necessarily need, you know, the background doesn't necessarily need to know like the 5 pages of bullshit dialogue that's going to go on. But sometimes it's like, then the cops break down the door and arrest the hooker. It's like, yeah, they kind of need to know that. Like, don't just show up to set and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, no, yeah, of course. Like, and you know, the script will dictate what you do. Like, that's the other big mistake, is that like sometimes people, like, I remember, I can't remember the film, but it was a dramatic film, and there was a hospital scene, and like there's, you know, they're delivering the message that dad's dead. And my God, the background looked like an episode of ER. Like, it was just so frantic and crazy. So like, you know, if you're as an AD, like, you know, you want to have fun and you're like, oh yay, like this is going to be so much fun, but it doesn't match the tone of the scene. And then that's extremely distracting. So, but like, you know, sometimes people want to do dumb stuff. Sometimes I've been asked to do really dumb stuff, and then I just say, okay.
That's why I always defer to my seconds about background placement, because you guys are always a lot. But I mean, I used to do it all the time, and that was my thing. But then I've sort of transitioned out of that, and so I always trust my ADs, you know, for that. And then I'll just watch the monitor and tweak it.
Yeah.
Some first like ownership of the background, which is fine. It's not my.
Setting background,
Go
like
ahead,
one of
Nate.
the most creative things that you can do that gets across. You know, if you're putting your stamp on a project, setting background is something that you can say when your mom is sitting there, like she's like, "Oh, my son or my daughter did that," or your friends or whatever. Like it's probably one of the most creative things that an AD can do on a project.
Agreed, because a lot of it's just logistics, but that's the one time you can really, you know, flex your creative muscles and stuff. And like the flow things, you know, and like doing that final cross at the end, right before they cut out, and, you know, all those little things, you know, that are really good. The little counters, and, you know, all these terms that these newbies that are listening right now have no idea what I'm talking about. If we have more time, I'll get into it, but, you know.
Yeah, no.
Hopefully they enjoy the AD nerds on this forum, because we're all
right. Who's the audience?
Like, remember this turnaround issue in this scene? Oh my gosh, we're all nerding out.
We didn't start on the ground floor here. No, we didn't start with terminology. It's like just dive right into it.
Yeah, so
really,
for those
like, really
of you watching
stuff. Yeah.
Sorry.
Right.
I was thinking about what you had said before, and it made me think of a movie, Minority Report. And I feel like that's like a big part of our position, is thinking of what a problem is before it happens and fixing it before it actually happens.
Yeah, definitely. You know, reacting, interacting.
I mean, in response to that, Nate, I think, sorry, go ahead, Christophe.
If I may, that's why, you know, second, of course, roll on set with the background, which is very important, but also always feel like second is my set of eyes and ears on set, because I'm unfortunately up in the trailer dealing with other things at base, and I need to see, you know, anything happens. Sometimes UPM or producer will call me like, hey, so what happened with this, or what are we doing this? And that's a constant communication flow. That's really, really important.
Mm-hmm. So I want to take the last 20 minutes that we have just to, you know, get into some fun stuff. Although it's still been fun the whole time anyway. But I just wanted to get into any crazy stories you guys may have from set without, you know, releasing too much information about, you know, what actor you're working with or director or whatever that's. But I'm going to have Nate Patterson start with the story of he and I on Complications, because we were doing some stunt work and I was holding a safety meeting in the middle of an intersection. And we always kind of, Linda, I think on the PA Academy kind of tells this story that you never know what's going to happen on a film set, and you have to be prepared for anything. So Nate, I can tell this story, but I feel like because you were the one that actually saved the day. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
I actually want to hear it from your angle of
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you can interject though, as you should.
All right.
So anyway, we're doing this show called Complications. I was the second unit first. We were doing a bunch of stunt stuff, and we had a scene where we had a car's racing around and it got T-boned in the middle of an intersection. And so we had the intersection locked off by 4 corners with cops at all corners and blockades to keep, you know, any vehicles out so we could do it safely. And then we had the Russian arm, which is a crane on a Porsche Carrera, usually, you know, that can race around with cars and do stuff. And we had other cameras positions. So I was going through the safety meeting, talking about where the camera positions are, what specifically the stunt is. You know, I'd have the stunt coordinator talk about things. And also, I always tell everybody, as every AD does, is that you have PAs locking up different areas to make sure nobody walks into the street, you know, and you have camera people watching things, you have producers watching things, you have cops watching things, and you work with the police. And I was talking, I said, okay, so if anybody sees anything awry, anything that, you know, somebody walks out into the middle of the street, you know, a car busts the lockup, all these kind of things. Anybody and everyone can say abort on the walkie, and everything comes to a complete halt. And we clear the street, you know, whatever. And I was talking to the police officer and I said, yeah, and even you, sir, you know, if you see something, have no qualms, you know, just saying abort and lot, you know, and keeping us safe. Because, you know, if somebody may break your lockup or something. He goes, yeah, nobody's going to break my lockup. At that moment, Mr. Patterson comes running down the road because he was watching one of the back things going, abort, abort, abort. We're like, oh shit. And so we all pulled out of the intersection. A dude came flying through the intersection in a U-Haul truck with like 3 or 4 cop cars chasing him. He had stolen this thing and like screamed through the intersection and stuff like that.
Car chase in the middle of the floor. Oh my God.
In the middle of the intersection. It busted the police's lockup because the dudes just didn't care. Nate was the first person to see it. So he, you know, he was the hero of the day. And he went through, and I think they came back through the intersection a second time, I think.
They did.
But on it. We took the, you know, we had the rush arm, we just pulled it out of the way and we just rolled on this shit happening. But you never know what's going to happen on a set. So is that how you recall it, Patterson?
Yeah, that's exactly how I recall it. Like that. It was just wild seeing the U-Haul flying down the street with police cars chasing it and coming right for us. It was like, oh, what's going on?
And I literally just had the conversation about calling abort. And I literally had just been with a police officer going, yeah, and even you, sir. And he goes, well, nobody's going to bust our lockup. And then abort, abort, abort.
Yeah.
So
that's a testament to like the AD department, you know, like safety is like paramount. Is one of our biggest things, like making sure that each and every individual on set is safe and our protocols are met and people are in position to handle business and make sure that happen. And because of your safety meeting, I was in position to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I can't remember who the Russian arm driver was, but I remember he was really impressed with our team. We had a really great team on that for safety. And he was, you know,
He had us all take a picture on top of ground and on top of the Russian arm, you know.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Who else has got a nutso story? I may have, like, you know, that's the one, my favorite one.
Well, I mean, it depends. Ben, sorry, you want to? I see it. I'm so sorry.
You go ahead. It's fine.
Well, just the management of cast sometimes, because sometimes a film set could be high school with money. So in the role of the key second assistant director, you have to kind of like manage up, which doesn't include cast, because if you think about it, actors are upper management because they have 2 commas in their salary sometimes, but yet you still manage their movements. And you even have to manage the producers with the information and how you deliver that information. But like we were about a month over schedule. Some of you on this forum will probably know what show I'm talking about. And the cast were losing their leases to their housing because we were a month over schedule, and you know their agents had only booked, you know, so far in advance, and it just kept going week after week after week. And the amount of apologies that the key second A chair can give is only so much. But it gets to the point where, well, what does this person have? Because I want that, because production. So like we started putting them up at the Ritz-Carlton, and when actors like, are they getting the Ritz-Carlton? I want to be at the Ritz-Carlton because fuck this shit. I don't, you know, I'm supposed to be on my other show a month ago. I want to be at the Ritz-Carlton, you know, and managing that. And I think that's kind of like one of the funniest aspects of, you know, personality management, and just keeping those tempers, you know, that are flaring because we're over schedule.
That was one of my questions I didn't have time for, because I was asked Christophe how he manages strong talent personalities, because he's He's had his hands full a few times. I know that. So I think if you wanted to interject on that at all.
Will do. On a daily basis. Well, time management, with casts that are more difficult, just basically, there's actually not, if somebody who's going to be late, I'm talking hours late. Hopefully that ahead of time in prep, and then you schedule it with that in mind. You have to have all of these like safety, like back plans that go, okay, what happens if he shows up in 2 hours, 2.5 hours late? What do we do then? Is there anything we can shoot before then? It's all, and knowing that ahead of time is key. If you don't, then, but at the beginning of the show, you're going to, talk to other ADs. Or you worked with this guy before, you worked with this actress before, and you try to collect as much information as you can. But yeah, no, time management with cast, it's definitely much.
Ben, you had a story it looked like you were going to tell before.
I was just going to tell a fun JD story. I mean, it's like one of my favorite things about this job is the fact that, I feel like I get to learn something new on most shows, just some process thing. I learned how to make a script into Braille for that kid on American Underdog with you, JD. You got a person to call for that now.
Yeah.
But we shot a day on safety, JD and I, and Nate as well, of course, where we were able to shoot at halftime of a Clemson football game in Clemson, to get all of our on the field football scenes. And it's one of those days that I doubt I'll ever have a day like that on set ever again. It's just completely unique. It doesn't resemble any other shooting day. Apart from a few shots in the stands, our entire filming time was, I think, 7 minutes and 12 seconds. You probably know the exact second count, JD, but
7:42, yeah.
7.2. Okay, we got 30 more. I shorted us 30 seconds, but
you may
we
be
had
right.
the time.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I have the timeline here somewhere, but it's like between the times that the marching bands left the field and the end of halftime, we had run all our players and all of our coaches and sideline guys onto the field and run as many plays as we could. And so it's one of those cases where it almost resembled to me like what I imagine like live TV must feel like sometimes, where it's like, you're only going to get one shot at this. We have to rehearse this as much as humanly possible. We had multiple rehearsal days with every single player in similar field situations, and then a day on the field itself. And it's just one of those things where there's so much anticipation for it. It was day 6 of our schedule, if I remember correctly. A whole movie to shoot after this, it was, which we also had to prep for. But we put so much attention and care into this, and just hoping you're going to pull it off. And the fact that we did, the fact that we got everything and it all looked great in the movie.
How many
cameras
did you guys order for that?
There's 9 cameras.
9 cameras?
9 cameras.
We had one shot at it. That makes sense.
2 scenes, 4 plays.
Oh yeah.
7 minutes, 42 seconds. And it was so loud, there's 80,000 people in the stands. Nobody went anywhere at lunch at halftime.
It was such a bad game. We thought people were going to leave. We were really worried they were going to leave. They stayed to watch us.
You couldn't hear anything, because the crowd was so loud. And also there's so much interference that we had a flag system, and so it's like, we'd set up and do a thing. I'd raise the flag, and I'd look at all the ADs that were at each camera. And once their flag was up, I'd drop mine, and then the play would start. And we get to the end of raise it again. Cameras reset, go again, boom.
Was that system designed in prep? Was that system designed in prep?
Yeah, we prepped a lot.
That's a great solution.
We tried a bunch of things for communication too. We had like the different kinds of headsets. We tried. Nothing worked that we could actually hear. So we figured, what, flags are the most clear way of telling I'm ready, my camera's ready.
Smoke signals in 2020.
Right. 5 ADs on the field, each with a camera, and then 4 other cameras up above. And then at the last minute, ESPN gave us their broadcast cameras just because.
Oh yeah, we got
they're nice. We got the Sky Cam. It was it's one of those things that you're like, it could go any number of ways. We prepped to be as buttoned up as possible, be as ready as possible. But the fact that we pulled that off, I'm still very proud of that project, and really just will take that with me forever.
We had to rush off the field because we just had like maybe 8 seconds to spare, I think, because the band was there lining up. We had to rush off the field, and they're literally coming on the field as we went out. And I remember we all came into the locker room, and I was there with all the football players and all the camera guys and us, and it was like, okay, this is what it feels like to win like a national championship football game right now. There was so much beautiful energy. And the funny thing is, I remember when we did our first scene and we came down and they had gotten circle before and got to the first play, we had to have our team, the Clemson team, run down the hill and do their thing and celebrate and go to the sidelines. And then I had to signal for our opposing actors and the opposing team to come out. And so I signal for them to come out, and I'm paying attention to other shit. And then the whole crowd starts booing.
Ooh, they got booed.
And they're booing the fake opposing team that was playing.
These are extras. These are just extras who happen to be in like all opposite uniforms. It's like, man, that crowd got so into it. It was great. Yeah.
There's something to be said about what we do as ADs in film industry is about all of these stories. We always find ourselves at any time of day or night in sometimes the scariest part of cities, or sometimes the most incredible pieces of nature. And it's a privilege to be working and sometimes have these moments either in cities or in nature at any time of day or night. And there are moments, magical moments. I remember the film called Life as a House. We were shooting on the coast, and our set was really on the cliff in California. And we're doing this magic hour shot with the crane. And at that very moment, the whole flight of pelicans flew over the house and started circling above the house. And these are things that you don't have control over, but you just stand there, and it's absolutely magical.
I know.
I remember that moment because it's just incredible.
That's the beautiful thing about this process in filmmaking. Through all the pain that it can cause, we're building worlds every day. And we get to when we go to set, we're in a brand new place every day, unless you're sitting on the stage the whole time or whatnot. Even on the stage, you have a whole new set, but it's like you get a tour of the world, man. It's like my location scouts are like vacations in a way, because I'm getting to see all these things that I would normally never, ever see or experience. So that's the beautiful thing about filmmaking. It is not easy. For all you newbies, it's going to hurt a lot. But the payoff is just, I don't know, stellar. Great.
This forum alone is a payoff, I mean, years of, hearing these names and knowing some of you, it's a pleasure to hear these stories. I mean, Christophe, I'd love to have a beer with you and, listen to your stories, and I've known Ben for a long, this is a really great forum. Thank you for putting it together, to you and Linda, JD.
Yeah, man. Cool. I think we're good. I think we covered a lot of stuff. Hopefully it was informative and fun. And I really appreciate all you guys being here to do this on a Sunday. John Bonnie actually must have had a lot of fun because he didn't work on his blue call sheet yet.
No.
Because he have to bow out.
And for those newbies, long story short, just to kind of give a microcosm view of like what that means for those of you who don't know. So on Friday, we had our first day of our number 3 in our call sheet, and we've been designing looks and whatnot. And then her first day was Friday of photography. And there was an element of that individual wanting to do their own makeup because they didn't necessarily think, or they had their own concepts of wanting to do that. And it's a studio picture, and the studio saw the dailies from the camera test, which was Thursday on her, which our makeup artist did and the studio liked. And then Friday, she came to set having had done her own makeup because of personal views. And long story short, the studio got those notes on the first scene on Friday, and it sounds like we're going to move the scene that she's in on Monday to the last up. So there can be a discussion on Monday on how to navigate the look of number 3 on the call sheet. So now it's funny because
I have makeup tests.
What's that?
You don't have makeup tests, camera tests?
On Thursday with this particular.
And
that was signed off on, but when they decided to do their own thing, it necessarily wasn't. So the studio had notes on that. And I think on Monday, we're taking the scene that she's in, which was first up, is moving last up, or we're going to use half the day of inserts to kind of get that discussion going, so to speak. What does that mean? That means I have to work on a Sunday, redo all the call times for all the actors, redo all the call times for all the extras, reorder the strips and inform the departments because we have a special effects thing and we also have inserts to do and all that stuff. So that
Remember, I was
Every
information.
second AD has been there. We've all been there, man.
It's a beautiful
Yeah,
thing.
everybody's nodding their heads. Yeah, it's like, but that's part of the chair, but it's also part of the union. I'm part of the Directors Guild, and I will charge for working on Sunday. And my union says that I get a 7th-day pay for doing this call sheet, whether it's 1 hour of work or whether it's 5 hours of work. I'm
Easy
proud to be
done.
a Directors Guild of America union member because now I get a 7th day, but that was hard earned and with blood, sweat, and tears.
All
So
right. Well, yeah, with the beauty comes the pain.
yeah.
Sometimes, fantastic. Unless anybody has anything else to say, I'd love to say love you all. Thank you so
Oh, I
much
love
for
you,
being here.
JD.
Thanks,
was
JD.
great.
It's great
Glad
to
we
see
were
all
able
you
to get
guys.
together and you guys were able to meet each other. And then
Yeah.
It's good to see everybody.
I think that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and
Yeah.
Paul.